Hello and welcome to the Neopod. In this episode, a review on a fast lens, a chat about the film Interstellar, and picking up the best computer for your video production needs.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Neopod, our podcast on all things to do with film. We will aim to release one of these podcasts each month, but releases may be more or less frequent than this depending on the other work we have to do.
We would like to take this brief opportunity to remind you of our upcoming web series, Population, which is currently in pre-production. Subscribe to the Neocast Film channel to immediately see updates and our latest videos.
I am Ed Hill.
And I'm Alex.
And we are first going to be talking about what you need to do when you're buying a computer. This guide will be targeted at people who are looking to build their own computer, mainly not for people who just want to buy an off-the-shelf computer that's already been built by a company like Dell, HP or Lenovo. Alex, why don't you tell us the sort of basic premise of what happens when you're buying a computer?
So when you're buying a computer, you're always weighing up the power against the cost. And as you get into the higher end components, it costs more money to increase by the same percentage of power. So
we think for video editing, a multi-core CPU, that is a processor, is essential. We would recommend either an Intel i5, an i7, or if you have a lot of money, an Intel Xeon processor, which is a nice option with a lot more cores and support for ECC RAM, which can make renders a lot more stable. AMD do have some options on the lower end, whereas Intel have some really good options if you're willing to spend a bit more. Our preference is Intel mainly because of the hyper-threading feature on higher Intel processors. Alex, why don't you tell us about GPUs?
A good GPU is definitely important, as most non-linear editors, such as the Adobe software and think Final Cut Pro, support GPU-accelerated rendering. NVIDIA's Quadro line of GPUs are good if all you want to do is video editing or visual effects, and definitely animation work as well, due to the way they work, which has been optimized for video work, as well as the ability to output 10-bit color, although you'll need a decent monitor to make use of this functionality. Whereas if you want to game, or want a more all-round GPU, then the GeForce lineup may be better for you. Note that all Adobe products are only accelerated by NVIDIA GPUs, not AMD.
Again, AMD GPUs are an option, but we prefer NVIDIA for our PCs because of the Kepler architecture that it runs on, as well as the sheer price-to-performance ratio. that is me, Ed, also prefer NVIDIA GPUs because I do a lot of 3D work and I can use the CUDA functionality for rendering and more real-time previewing in renders like V-Ray RT, which is my personal consumer-grade renderer. Having at least 8 gig of RAM, that is gigabytes of RAM, is pretty much a necessity, as when video editing you use a lot of RAM, especially if you plan to have a number of applications open at once, or you'll be working with more than 1080p footage.
We will link in the description to a few recommended builds on PC Parts Picker.
As regards to peripherals, which are arguably almost as important as the PC itself, we recommend you buy a good IPS monitor, preferably at 1080p or 2.5K or higher. Dell's UltraSharp lineup are absolutely lovely. We both use them. They are our personal favourites, and they are also beautifully calibrated to make grading and colour work easier. The only downside with them is that they are expensive for the resolution that you get. They also do a lovely 5K UltraSharp, but that is unnecessary for most users. We only use 1080p, 2.5K and 3K monitors for our work.
A good mouse and keyboard are important. We use the Razer equipment mostly. Ed uses the Razer Naga mouse. Alex uses the Razer, I use the Razer Ouroboros. I also use the Black Widow Ultimate keyboard, whereas Ed uses, I think it's a Logitech one.
Yes, I use the keyboard that came with the Logitech MX5500 bundle, which it's an okay keyboard. It's not the greatest. It has some rebindable function keys, but it's not the greatest keyboard in the world. I am looking to upgrade at some point.
Mm-hmm.
We would like to mention, just to clarify, that buying a Mac is always an option. I know a lot of people are very against buying a Mac because of the rumours that they heard about them, and also about Apple as a company, if you really want to, but you can always buy a far more powerful PC for the same cost as a lower spec Mac. PCs also tend not to cost as much as when a component breaks or wears out, since you can buy a new component and install it yourself. Whereas for the majority of Mac components, on the other hand, you must take the computer to an Apple store to get it fixed at a ridiculous premium.
That's enough about computers, since we must now move on to the review of the fast Samyang 35mm t1.5 lens.
It's always important when filmmaking to choose the right lens for the job and your camera. An APS-C or Super 35mm sensor camera we'll need wider lenses to get the same shot as on a full-frame sensor.
This is a review of a good, relatively fast 35mm full-frame capable prime lens from Samyang.
This lens is a T1.5 lens, which is approximately an f1.4 if you do not know the difference between T-stops and f-stops. If you don't know the difference, you can always Google it. We don't have really time to explain it now.
There's a good video on YouTube, actually. I'll put the link in the description for it. The bokeh you can get with this lens is lovely and creamy. It has a good shallow depth of field.
There is also a manual aperture ring and only manual focus.
Though this isn't a bad thing, as it's usually better to use manual everything anyway. Also on this lens there is no image stabilization. As you can see from some of the shots on London, they're a bit shaky, but personally I really like this sort of handheld effect.
I think it's important not to rely on image stabilization in a lens, and it's better to instead invest your money in a decent camera rig, such as a glide cam, a steady cam if you've got a bigger camera, or a good shoulder rig.
Yeah, also because most of the proper cinema lenses don't actually have image stabilization on them, so...
It's generally regarded as not a necessary feature in higher-end lenses.
Yeah.
The focus ring on the lens also has a large diameter, so it takes quite a lot of effort to pull around, making for nice smooth focus pulls and making it easier to wrap focus. The lens itself is quite heavy. This can obviously be good or bad depending on whether you're working handheld or on a rig. And we use it on our latest film, London, and we'll put a link in the description to that. It's also on our channel. We must now move on to the review and a quick chat about the film Interstellar, directed by Christopher Nolan. We'll try to avoid spoilers wherever possible in this review, however it is hard to review such a complex film without giving away certain aspects of the plot.
Whilst humanity faces extinction due to famine, drought and severe climate changes, a wormhole is discovered within the solar system, giving mankind an opportunity to increase its lifespan. A group of explorers must travel through the wormhole in search of a planet that could sustain human life. The pilot of their aircraft, the Endurance, must decide between the future of the human race and seeing his children again.
The film was directed by the famous director Christopher Nolan, who also created the Batman films and another well-known sci-fi hit, Inception. And while Inception played with somewhat abstract and potentially possible concepts, the Batman films were downright unbelievable. Not that this detracts from those films. Interstellar, on the other hand, despite Nolan's brilliant yet cold and clinical style, told a story that was both deeply emotional but also firmly rooted in real scientific theory. The film explores theories such as wormholes, the space-time continuum, the concept of higher dimensions, and also time dilation in gravitational fields such as those of black holes.
We saw Coop's daughter, Murph, start off young as he leaves, but then she grows up while he is off the Earth. At the end of the film, we see her lying in a bed in a hospital, while Coop is the same age, or quite a similar age to when he left.
The film was scored by the wonderful Hans Zimmer, who also worked with Nolan before on the Batman films and also Inception. Zimmer was not afraid to think outside the box and use more minimalistic ensembles and also a pipe organ to achieve the desired mood in the film. The visual effects in the film were mostly worked on by a British visual effects company called Double Negative, also called DNEG for short. DNEG also worked on Inception and, you guessed it, the Batman films. It seems clear to me that Nolan has found somewhat of a winning formula when it comes to spectacular effects, composition and the direction of a film, and has stuck with it across with his portfolio. Thank you for listening to the Neopod. This is Ed Hill and Alexander Haynes.
We would encourage you to subscribe to our channel to receive updates on our videos. Like if you enjoyed the podcast, and dislike if you didn't. Remember, it is always nice to know why you liked or disliked a video, so feel free to email us at contact@neocastfilms.com or comment below.
We will endeavour to read all of your comments and reply when necessary. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.